In Oklahoma, one of the states with the highest execution rates in the U.S., over 125 death row inmates have been executed since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. These individuals committed not only heinous crimes, but also left behind haunting stories about justice and retribution. Here are some of the most brutal death row inmates, ranked based on the severity of their crimes, the cruelty of their actions, and the lasting impact they left on their communities. Have you ever wondered, what crimes did these individuals commit? And in their final moments, what would they choose to eat, and what would they say? Could their last words make us rethink justice and the death penalty? Let's explore these shocking and haunting stories about death row inmates, from their crimes to their last meals and final words, to better understand the cost of justice. 1. Bigler Jobe Stouffer 2, Oklahoma. On the morning of January 24, 1985, the winter air in Oklahoma City was still thick with fog. Inside the quiet home of 35-year-old teacher Linda Reeves, a gunshot rang out, followed by two more. When the police arrived, Linda was already dead, while her companion, Douglas Ivins, was lucky to survive, albeit in critical condition. No one expected the killer to be Ivins' ex-wife's former boyfriend, Bigler Stouffer, then in his 40s. What seemed like a simple case of jealousy soon uncovered a darker motive, a $2 million life insurance policy, with Ivins as the beneficiary. In court, Douglas Ivins became a key witness, his testimony dismantling Stouffer's defense. The death penalty was handed down, but it would take nearly 4 decades for it to be carried out. On December 9, 2021, in the execution chamber at McAllister Prison, 79-year-old Bigler Stouffer became the oldest person executed in Oklahoma in years. He didn't request a special last meal. Instead, he ate what the prison provided: a chicken sandwich, 2 slices of white bread, fries, broccoli, fruit mix, 2 cookies, a bottle of water, and a glass of fruit juice. There was no defiance, no dramatics. When asked if he had any last words, he simply whispered, "My request is that my father forgives them. Thank you." A soft-spoken plea echoed in the room, leaving behind no room for lies or excuses. Then, silence. No more gunshots, no more courtrooms. Just one lingering question: was forgiveness truly beginning with that moment? 2. James Allen Coddington, Oklahoma. On March 6, 1997, a quiet afternoon in Oklahoma City shattered with an unimaginable crime. James Allen Coddington, 24, in a fit of uncontrolled rage, brutally murdered his elderly friend and colleague, Albert Hale, 73, in the comfort of his own home. Before the crime, Coddington had asked Hale for a loan of $50 to buy cocaine, but when Hale refused, the rage drove him to violence. In a moment of fury, Coddington struck Hale in the head with a hammer 3 to 4 times. The blows echoed in the silence of the home. After Hale collapsed, Coddington didn't stop. He took $520 from Hale's home, fled, and left a family in devastation. This crime shocked the community, raising questions about the fragility of the human mind in extreme moments of anger. Despite being arrested and prosecuted, Coddington continued to assert his innocence, leading to public debates over the case. His defense couldn't soften the brutality of his actions. With irrefutable evidence, his death sentence was upheld. After years of waiting, on August 25, 2022, he was executed by lethal injection. On his final day, Coddington requested a simple meal: 2 fried fish sandwiches, 2 cheese sandwiches, 2 large orders of fries, and a large soft drink. A humble meal, perhaps fitting for the end of a tumultuous life. When asked if he had any final words, Coddington whispered quietly, in a calm and measured voice, "I want to thank my family, friends, lawyers, and everyone who loved me. Governor Stitt, I do not blame you, and I forgive you." A last apology, but one that couldn't erase the horror he had caused. It wasn't an act of redemption, but rather a late acknowledgement in the final moments of his life. 3. Phillip Dean Hancock, Oklahoma. On April 27, 2001, in the southern part of Oklahoma City, a bloody shooting ended the lives of 2 men, Robert Lee Jett Jr. and James Vincent Lynch III. Phillip Dean Hancock, 34 years old, shot and killed both men inside Jett's home after a heated argument. Hancock claimed he acted in self-defense when he was attacked by Jett and Lynch, who he said had tried to lock him in a cage. However, when the case went to trial, the jury did not agree with Hancock's self-defense claim, and he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Despite constantly asserting his innocence and claiming that his actions were in self-defense, Hancock's sentence remained unchanged. Though there were doubts surrounding the case, the evidence and the circumstances of the crime convinced the court of the need for severe punishment. On November 30, 2023, Hancock faced death, and his execution was carried out by lethal injection. Hancock's final day passed quietly. His last meal was a simple request: a bucket of fried chicken legs from KFC, no sides, along with a large root beer, a meal that was simple, yet comforting in his final moments. When asked if he had any last words before leaving, Hancock did not shy away. "I want to thank my lawyers. I acted in self-defense. I hope I will be exonerated after my death. And I also want to say that the Oklahoma Attorney General's office is immoral and dishonorable." These words were not an apology, but a declaration defending Hancock's personal viewpoint, once again asserting that he would never accept his conviction. Hancock's death marked not only the end of a life, but also raised unresolved questions about justice and truth. 4. Emmanuel Antonio Littlejohn, Oklahoma. On June 19, 1992, at the Root and Scoot convenience store in Oklahoma City, a robbery turned into a tragedy when Kenneth Mears, the store owner, was shot in the face and killed during the robbery. Emmanuel Antonio Littlejohn, along with Glenn Bethany, was one of the perpetrators. Littlejohn admitted to participating in the robbery but denied being the one who fired the shot. However, despite his denial, the evidence gathered pointed to him, leading to a death sentence. This case was not only shocking due to its brutality but also because of the complex legal issues and debates surrounding Littlejohn's role in the victim's death. After years of waiting, Littlejohn's death sentence was set for September 26, 2024, and he would face execution by lethal injection, using a mixture of midazolam, vecuronium bromide, and potassium chloride. Littlejohn's final meal was a comfort food meal, consisting of meat pizza, Coca-Cola, and 2 slices of cheesecake. A simple meal, yet enough to offer a small bit of comfort in his final moments. When asked for his final words, Littlejohn calmly turned to his mother and daughter, speaking in a voice full of emotion. "Everything will be okay. Mom, I love you. Daughter, I love you." His last words were not an apology nor a defense. It was a message of love for his loved ones, the ones who would continue their lives without him. And so, part of Littlejohn's life came to a close in quiet reflection, carrying the regret and hope that his family would find peace, even though his story was never truly over. 5. Thomas J. Grasso, Oklahoma and New York. On December 24, 1990, amidst the festive cheer of Christmas Eve, 87-year-old Hilda Johnson spent her final days in solitude in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But that night, instead of the sounds of holiday bells, her home echoed with the final sounds of Christmas lights being yanked tight, followed by an eerie silence. The perpetrator was 25-year-old Thomas J. Grasso. After strangling Hilda with the very Christmas lights from her tree, he took $12 and a television. A petty robbery for such a horrific crime. 6 months later, on July 4, 1991, on American Independence Day, Grasso struck again, this time in Staten Island, New York. His victim was 81-year-old Leslie Holtz. Grasso killed him to steal his $91 Social Security check. Once again, he killed over an amount that no one would think was worth the price of a life. After his arrest, Grasso did not deny his crimes. He admitted to everything coldly. Both Oklahoma and New York sought his execution, with Oklahoma being given priority. On March 20, 1995, Thomas J. Grasso's death sentence was carried out by lethal injection. In his final moments, Grasso requested a lavish meal, almost a banquet. 2 dozen steamed clams, 2 dozen steamed oysters with lemon, a double cheeseburger from Burger King, half a dozen barbecue ribs, 2 strawberry milkshakes, half a pumpkin pie with whipped cream and sliced strawberries, and notably, a can of SpaghettiOs with meatballs. However, when the meal arrived, the SpaghettiOs were substituted with regular spaghetti. His last words were not an apology, not an expression of remorse. Just a mocking complaint. I didn't get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know that. A cold and sarcastic remark, much like the way he entered death row. Absurd, brutal, and haunting. 6. John Marion Grant, Oklahoma. On November 13, 1998, in the courtyard of Dick Connor Correctional Facility in Hominy, Oklahoma, what seemed like an ordinary morning turned into a tragedy. John Marion Grant, serving a 130-year sentence for multiple armed robberies, got into a heated argument with kitchen worker, 58-year-old Gay Carter, over a breakfast tray. What started as a minor disagreement quickly escalated. Grant dragged Carter into a storage room, where no witnesses were present, and repeatedly stabbed her 16 times with a homemade shank, causing her to bleed to death. It was a brutal, violent act that no one in the prison could have predicted. This incident sent shockwaves through the Oklahoma prison system. Given his violent history, Grant's death sentence seemed inevitable. After more than 2 decades behind bars, his execution was scheduled for October 28, 2021. The method: lethal injection using a mixture of midazolam, vecuronium bromide, and potassium chloride. Before his execution, Grant requested his final meal according to his preferences: 2 bacon cheeseburgers with onions, tomatoes, pickles, lettuce, and mustard, barbecue-flavored potato chips, a 2-liter bottle of Mr. Pibb soda, half a gallon of Neapolitan ice cream, a large pack of Nutter Butter cookies, a meal full of sugar and fat, almost like a final act of defiance against the world outside the bars. When the moment arrived, Grant didn't remain silent. Instead, he yelled 3 times, "Let's go! Let's go! Let's go!" Then, he began shouting profanities, which led the execution team to describe it as one of the most chaotic and intense executions they had ever witnessed. No apologies. No final words to the victim's family. Grant left with a shout and fury, as if even death couldn't silence him. 7. Roger Dale Stafford, Oklahoma. On June 22, 1978, a bloodbath took place on a stretch of highway near Purcell, Oklahoma. Roger Dale Stafford, along with his wife and brother, killed 3 innocent members of the Lorenz family in a senseless act of violence. Just 3 weeks later, on July 16, 1978, he committed another brutal murder at a Sirloin Stockade restaurant in Oklahoma City, killing 6 employees during a robbery. The killings not only took the lives of 6 victims but also left a deep, unhealing scar in the community. After his arrest, Stafford showed no remorse for his actions. Throughout his trial, he maintained his innocence, claiming he was a victim of an unjust system. However, undeniable evidence led to his conviction and death sentence. On July 1, 1995, Stafford was executed by lethal injection. His last meal request was peculiar and indulgent: chocolate ice cream, 6-foot-long chili dogs with cheese, 2 chocolate milkshakes, French fries, a meal that seemed unrelated to the crimes he had committed but was the one Stafford requested in his final moments. When asked if he had any last words, Stafford didn't express remorse. Instead, he said, "I want to tell the world that you are witnessing an innocent man being killed. I have nothing to lose by lying." After that, he closed his eyes and said, "Oh my God." It was a controversial last statement, challenging both society and those who had convicted and executed him. Stafford left without granting peace to anyone. And so, his life ended in an unresolved tragedy. 8. Stephen Ray Thacker, Oklahoma, Missouri, Tennessee. Between December 23, 1999, and January 2, 2000, Stephen Ray Thacker committed 3 murders across 3 different states. His killing spree began in Oklahoma, where Thacker lured 25-year-old Lacey Dawn Hill to a secluded cabin, where he raped and murdered her. He then moved on to Missouri, where he killed 24-year-old Forrest Reed Boyd during a robbery. Finally, in Tennessee, he murdered 52-year-old Ray Patterson, a truck driver, continuing his violent rampage. Thacker's actions not only claimed the lives of 3 victims but also left deep psychological scars on the families and communities affected. He was arrested and sentenced to death, and on March 12, 2013, his sentence was carried out by lethal injection. Before his execution, Thacker requested a simple meal that contrasted sharply with the crimes he had committed: a large meat lover's pizza, a small bag of peanut M&Ms, a can of A&W root beer. It seemed like an ordinary meal, as if trying to blend in with life just one more time before he said goodbye. When asked for his last words, Thacker briefly responded, full of remorse, "I don't deserve it, but as God has forgiven me, I hope you will forgive me for the pain I've caused." He continued with a hopeful statement about salvation. "An eternity in heaven is mine." Though Thacker's last words could not change the past, they were an acknowledgement of genuine regret in his final moments. He left with the hope of being forgiven, but the truth was that the pain he caused would never be healed. 9. Louis Eugene Gilbert, Ohio, Missouri, Oklahoma. Between August 29th and September 3rd, 1994, Louis Eugene Gilbert, along with his 16-year-old accomplice Eric Elliott, committed a series of murders across 3 different states, leaving behind a string of innocent victims who met brutal ends. The first murder occurred on August 29th in Port Washington, Ohio. Gilbert and Elliott broke into the home of 79-year-old Ruth Lucille Loader. When she discovered them and attempted to resist, they tied her up with a phone cord, placed her in the trunk of their car, and killed her. Ruth's body was never found, creating an unhealable wound for her family and the community. On August 30th, they continued their crime spree in Callaway County, Missouri. There, they entered the home of 86-year-old William Brewer and 76-year-old Flossie Brewer under the pretense of needing to use the phone. After being invited in, they tied up the elderly couple, took them to the basement, and shot each of them 3 times in the head. After the murders, they stole their victims' property and car, leaving behind a devastated family and a confused community. Finally, on September 3rd, in the area of Stanley Draper Lake in Oklahoma, they encountered 37-year-old Roxanne Ruddell, a security guard fishing after her shift. Gilbert and Elliott tied her hands, shot her 4 times in the head, and stole her truck along with some cash. This series of murders not only ended the lives of 3 victims but also caused lasting emotional scars for their families. Eventually, after being arrested and tried, Louis Eugene Gilbert was sentenced to death. On July 1, 2003, his sentence was carried out via lethal injection. In his final moments, Gilbert requested a simple meal: half a gallon of vanilla ice cream, a box of waffles, a box of Whoppers candy, a meal, oddly simple, marking the contradictory end of a misguided life. Before his execution, Gilbert made a peculiar and almost hopeful statement: "It's strange, but I really look forward to meeting God. I'm going home." These words didn't change the past or heal the wounds Gilbert had inflicted, but they reflected a desire to escape his own pain as he faced death. Gilbert passed away in silence, carrying with him the hurt he had caused. 10. Richard Stephen Fairchild, Oklahoma. On November 14, 1993, in Del City, Oklahoma, Richard Stephen Fairchild committed an unforgivable crime. In a fit of rage following an argument with his girlfriend, he took the life of her 3-year-old son. The act occurred while he was under the influence of alcohol and drugs, leaving a deep shock in the local community at the time. The death of the little boy not only took a brief life but also raised questions about self-control and responsibility. During his trial, Fairchild did not deny his actions, and despite his remorse, his sentence remained unchanged. On November 17, 2022, Fairchild was executed by lethal injection. On his last day, he requested a simple meal, a small comfort in his final moments: 2 cheeseburgers, French fries, pumpkin pie, chocolate ice cream, Coca-Cola. A simple meal, like a fleeting breeze in his short life. When asked for his last words, Fairchild expressed his remorse: "I am sorry to the family of Adam Broomhall, the victim. I am heartbroken for what I've done. I hope you will find peace today. To my family and those who supported me, I love you. I have accepted God as my Savior. I am going home to meet Him." These words showed his remorse and his plea for forgiveness. However, despite his regret, the crime he committed could not be forgiven, and the family of the victim would have to live with an irreplaceable loss. 11. Charles Frederick Warner, Oklahoma. In August of 1997, in Oklahoma City, Charles Frederick Warner was convicted for the murder of an 11-month-old girl, the daughter of his girlfriend. The girl's death resulted from an act of brutal violence that left the community and the victim's family in indescribable grief and loss. When Warner was arrested, The cruelty of his actions was so shocking that public outrage was immense, leading to a death sentence. On January 15, 2015, after years in prison and multiple appeals, Warner's sentence was carried out. The execution method was lethal injection, a mixture of midazolam, vecuronium bromide, and potassium acetate instead of the usual potassium chloride. A rare alteration in the execution process did not lessen the brutality he had inflicted on an innocent child. On his final day, Warner requested an oddly diverse yet comforting meal: KFC, a Big Mac, gummy worms, a fruit cocktail, French fries, cabbage salad, Coca-Cola. These were the foods he chose, rich and varied, but they couldn't soothe the pain Warner had caused. However, it wasn't the meal that stood out, but rather his final words. When asked if he had anything to say before leaving, Warner couldn't hold back his feelings. He began, "Before I give my final statement, I want to say they stuck me 5 times. It hurts. It feels like acid." As the drugs began to take effect, Warner said, "My body is on fire." Warner's last words not only reflected his physical pain but could also be seen as a rejection of his guilt. While he acknowledged the physical agony, the suffering he caused the victim's family remained unhealed, untouched by his words. 12. Richard Norman Rojem Jr., Oklahoma. On July 6, 1984, in Elk City, Oklahoma, Richard Norman Rojem Jr. kidnapped and murdered his 7-year-old stepdaughter, Layla Cummings. The crime occurred while Layla's mother was working a night shift at a fast food restaurant, leaving Layla at home with her brother. After being caught, irrefutable evidence, including fingerprints and physical evidence at the scene, linked Rojem to the crime. When Layla's body was found the next morning, the knife wounds on her small body shocked the public. Rojem could not escape a harsh sentence, and on June 27, 2024, his death sentence will be carried out by lethal injection. Rojem's final meal was a simple yet familiar selection: 2 small pizzas from Little Caesars with double cheese and pepperoni, 8 salt packets, 2 cups of vanilla ice cream, a bottle of ginger ale. When asked if he had any last words, Rojem responded briefly, "No. I already said my goodbyes." There was no remorse, no apology, no justification. Rojem's final words weren't just cold, they reflected a hardened mentality, unwilling to take responsibility for the death of a child. While he may have understood the consequences of his actions, his lack of an apology made the pain he caused even more profound and difficult to heal for the victim's family and the community. 13. Clayton Derrell Lockett, Oklahoma. In June of 1999, Clayton Derrell Lockett, along with 2 accomplices, carried out a brutal kidnapping and murder. Their victim was 19-year-old Stephanie Neiman, who was kidnapped, raped, and murdered in Oklahoma. After shooting her with a handgun, Lockett ordered one of his accomplices to bury the young woman alive, creating an unspeakable crime. Lockett's actions didn't stop at just one murder. They also included charges of rape, kidnapping, robbery, burglary, assault, and conspiracy to commit crime. Lockett's case shocked the community, not only because of the horrific violence but also because of his chilling indifference during the crime. After being caught and tried, Lockett was sentenced to death, with the sentence carried out on April 29, 2014. However, the execution faced serious issues due to the use of an untested drug combination, resulting in a failure to carry out a quick and humane execution. Lockett's last meal was a simple one, perhaps offering a small comfort in his final moments: a large double cheeseburger with bacon, a bag of Doritos, a can of Dr. Pepper, a slice of lemon meringue pie. A typical meal, not extravagant, but perhaps offering a sense of familiarity in his final moments. When asked if he had any last words, Lockett refused to make a statement. However, as the execution drugs began to take effect, Lockett oddly uttered the word "man" before dying of a heart attack 43 minutes after the injection. Lockett's death not only highlighted the failure of the execution system but also served as a warning about the humanity involved in carrying out the law. 14. Kevin Ray Underwood, Oklahoma. On April 12, 2006, in Purcell, Oklahoma, Kevin Ray Underwood committed an unimaginable crime. He lured 10-year-old Jamie Rose Bolin, his neighbor, into his apartment, where he then tortured the young girl. Underwood struck her in the head with a cutting board and then strangled her to death. He confessed that he had been planning to fulfill his sexual fantasies and cannibalistic desires for months. Although he intended to decapitate the victim and keep her body in his bed for a few days before cooking and eating her, he eventually abandoned this plan. This murder caused outrage and indescribable pain for the victim's family and the community. After being arrested and tried, Underwood was sentenced to death. On December 19, 2024, his sentence will be carried out by lethal injection. Underwood's final meal request was a hearty one, simple but still quite substantial: fried chicken steak, mashed potatoes with gravy, a cheeseburger with fries and ketchup, pinto beans, a loaf of hot bread, a soft drink. When asked about his final words, Underwood expressed remorse. "I want to apologize again for all the terrible things I've done. I hate what I've done, and I wish I could take it back." He also said that being executed on his birthday, just 6 days before Christmas, was the cruel and unnecessary thing for my family. These final words were not just about regret but also reflected the pain of a man facing the cost of his actions. Underwood's death not only ended a life of crime but also raised profound questions about justice, remorse, and the possibility of redemption in the final moments of life. Finally, the stories of the death row inmates in Oklahoma are not just about executions. They are reminders of the choices and decisions that each individual faces in life. Does justice truly prevail when death is the final outcome? Or is it merely part of the ongoing struggle between punishment and forgiveness? Each final meal and last word of these inmates not only reflect regret or defiance, but also open up larger questions about human nature, mistakes, and second chances. These stories will make you reflect on what truly matters in life. If you found this video intriguing and want to learn more about controversial stories, the lives of prisoners, and dramatic situations, don't forget to click subscribe and like so you won't miss the next videos. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you empathize or have a different perspective on these stories? Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.